You were looking at kind of moving into commercial real estate in a bigger way. What sort of due diligence do you ask for?
If you had a really bad month, if something unanticipated happened, how would you handle it? Going forward in the second half of 2020, be cautious and don't skip steps. Complete your due diligence, complete all of it. But at the same time, have some faith and have some resiliency in the landscape and in the people in our cities who are working and getting things done.
What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and in today's video, I catch up with my buddy Jon Kepler, and we talk about WTF is going on with commercial real estate in 2020. Now, back in 2019, I don't think a single person would predict we'd be having the type of conversations we are today about commercial real estate, and you can thank our buddy COVID-19, quarantine, and social distancing for that. But it's a fascinating time to be both looking at, watching, and investing in commercial real estate. And in today's video, myself and Jon, we just explore our thoughts and perspectives in regards to what's actually going on, how we can potentially pivot if necessary, and really how to make the most of these uncertain times. Because you can either be a victim or you can focus on really leveling up during this uncertainty. And really, it's up to us as individuals to make that decision. So let's dive into today's video.
So the next subject matter I'd love to explore, on a previous video, we started discussing, you were looking at kind of moving into commercial real estate in a bigger way, maybe starting to look at shopping plazas or even small malls. And I'd love to just explore with you, what's your perspective now in regards to that? Is this like the best opportunity ever? And are you just throwing every VTB offer out there and asking for crazy concessions? Or are you taking a wait and see approach? Or is it just really, again, specific about the fundamentals on that individual property?
I think similar to residential, you need to have a plan, not just to get in and start having cash flow on day one, but you need to have a plan for strategic renovations. And if you're not going to be renovating, then a strategic reposition in some way. So there was one deal in particular that I was looking at the last time we did that video, I remember.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we didn't write an offer on it. It did sell to someone else. I hate what they paid, and I'm glad it's not me. But I think that comes down to some limits at that specific property, not the market overall. And that the management of the vendor, I feel like the management didn't take advantage of certain opportunities, and the windows of those opportunities are closing. So I think that the new investor there, even if they're talented, let's say, or experienced, I think they're going to have some challenges because their potential for upside was reduced by some decisions that were made before they came along. And so in terms of my actual activity on commercial property, didn't buy that one, happy we didn't buy that one, not immediately going to submit an offer on something else like it. But I intend to and wish to participate as this industry evolves and pivots, and as, again, the future becomes selling less of more, and as commercial space, maybe that was formerly only retail space, becomes what I'll term flex space, again, where you serve customers both in person and virtually and curbside. So long term, I want to participate. I'm excited about it. But short term, I have paused what I was working on, and I'm going to be looking at subsequent deals very carefully through a new lens.
Got you. Do you mind just exploring with us what that new lens looks like? Are there certain, profile of tenants or like businesses that you would maybe shy away from having be your tenants? Or is there more due diligence or different types of due diligence that you're going to be doing, in this current environment versus what it would have looked like, say, 6 months or a year ago?
Some of this is very time specific. I don't think it's a problem for me to say that restaurants with dining rooms are cause for concern for a lot of people. I am certainly not trying to cause any pressure on restaurants with dining rooms. I feel for people who are struggling through that, but I think it's understood that is perhaps the single biggest problem amongst small businesses in Ontario that needs to be worked out right now. And there are some unique solutions in terms of different rules for patios and things they're trying to do to kind of make that work. But I suspect we won't be writing an offer on a building in the very near future where I have a commercial tenant like that I'd be taking over. In terms of retail, you can do a lot in your due diligence process. And one thing that's actually great about commercial deals and deals where you're working with professionals who are experienced is they're more understanding of the fact that you have your own due diligence protocols. So if you're buying a duplex and you say, hey, I need to ask the tenants a bunch of questions, the vendor might say, hold on, what are you doing? What do you mean? But when you're dealing with real professionals and you say, hey, I need to actually take the temperature of your tenants, I need to know what your tenants are really thinking, it's understood. So I would just be very detail oriented in terms of considering the tenant sentiments, asking them what their policies or plans would be if they had an unanticipated problem. Even in terms of apartments, we have on our application, if you had a payment problem, what would you do or who would you call? So in terms of commercial, it's the same thing, right? If you had a really bad month, if something unanticipated happened, how would you handle it? And just make sure that you're happy with getting behind the investment, because if you're buying a property that's fully tenanted, the momentum is likely already there, at least in the short term.
Do you mind, just for audience members that are maybe a little bit newer to the commercial world, what sort of due diligence do you ask for? Are you asking for financial statements? Are you diving deep into that? Is it very situational? And does it vary building by building? Because I know you've got, for a lot of your commercial properties, they're mixed use. So is there a certain formula or rule of thumb that you're approaching those mixed use buildings with that you might approach a pure commercial building differently with?
I'd say so, yes. So as I progressed through my career and we purchased multi-use properties, the thought was that the building would need to be very well situated to weather a commercial vacancy. So if it has a lot of apartments and relatively few storefronts, and then something happens to the storefronts, you're in a good position to maintain your cash flow and keep things working. Ideally, and again, we were buying at higher cap rates a few years ago than we are now, but a good position to be in, if you can arrange it, is to have your building cash flow, even if your commercial tenancy ends. So if you have to weather vacancy indefinitely in your commercial space, how would you do? So that has been our metric up to a point, though. The more we move on and the more buildings we buy, the more it is about each commercial tenant's covenant, the strength of their covenant, and what their resiliency is, what their level of enthusiasm is, their interest in possibly signing a new lease, even if the lease isn't up for renewal yet. If they have 2 years remaining on their lease, there's nothing wrong with asking them, what are you planning to do in the next few years? In 2 years, are you going to sign another 5? I've seen things like that. I've seen more than 10 years of what you could call, I don't know if you call it guidance or just good intentions or what, but I've seen that where you can really plan out how things are going to go. In certain cases, especially some of the larger single tenant buildings. So if you had a freestanding structure and the only tenant was Staples or something like that, you might have a very long-term lease and a shorter amortization schedule. So presuming the institutional tenant or the national tenant is able to pay through the term of their lease, maybe you're paying down the debt of the building so that you're in a very good financial position at the end of the term, no matter what happens. So that's another thing to consider in terms of due diligence. If you have a 10-year lease and you have vacancy after that, but you can chew through a lot of the debt in 10 years, maybe you're happy to have a vacancy after that. So it's hard to summarize this process because it's very much step by step in it. And I think I just illustrated here how it's very different for a mixed use building that's primarily apartments from, let's say, a single tenant building that is only retail. But there's a spectrum and many questions you can ask.
And then one last question just related to commercial real estate. I've definitely heard from other investors, them starting to, predict or guess that we'll likely see a lot of commercial real estate begin to be repurposed. And so I know you've touched upon, we might see businesses blend their business model or kind of pivot their business model. Do you think, will we see a lot of commercial space maybe repurposed either for, light industrial or residential?
Yes, I know less about light industrial, so I don't know how much credibility I have in. I see very interesting things happening in light industrial. I I don't think I'm necessarily positioned to ensure that it will go well for me. So I see some fascinating things, and I think that there are people who will do very well with it. In terms of other types of repurposing, there's infill, even when you don't think there's room for infill, there is. So parking lot pads, putting more leasable square feet onto the same plot of land. There's always chat about, especially with the housing crisis, the housing shortage, there's always chat about converting. I have mixed feelings about converting because there's the potential to convert an old mall, for example. There's potential to convert it poorly. There are some videos you can see how it's been done in some cities in the United States. And so converting a mall to kind of like a garden vibe, or kind of like an apartment around the perimeter type feel, doesn't always work. Also, remember, construction is still expensive. So you might say there's an opportunity in commercial real estate to pivot. There is not an opportunity to get your construction done for a whole lot less. So you're going to have that regardless. Again, I think it's going to be slow and over time. And I think that the people who appear to do very well with this, the businesses that in hindsight will look like geniuses, they've actually been holding on to the plots of land for quite a while as well. So in terms of will this happen, won't it happen, and should I buy today, it doesn't necessarily mean it will happen, so absolutely buy today. It might mean start putting in the building blocks today, or consider what you've already got that can be repurposed, and watch your debt levels too, because the less debt you have on a property that you're repurposing in a substantial way, the less it costs you each month, the more of an ability you have to really make sure that you can afford it if it goes sideways, or if there's some trouble.
To make sure you can follow through to completion. Yeah. There's nothing worse than a half converted property.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and then it's basically worthless. It's, I used to feel ripped off at the car dealership when I go for service. And then I always thought, there's some statistical probability that they have to stop halfway through. Or if they rip apart my car and then they don't put it back together, my car is worthless. There's a lot of value to be had in taking the broken car and getting it back together. So yes, if you're able to repurpose a property, you definitely deserve to profit. But if something goes wrong in the middle and it's not put back together, then it's blight, and nobody likes that. The municipality won't like that. The general public will be very unhappy. I've seen them grab picket signs over that before, actually. So you need to make sure you begin with the end in mind.
Love it. Any last tips or considerations for investors, either seasoned or brand new to commercial real estate, in regards to how to approach the second half of 2020?
Well, in terms of starting into commercial real estate before the end of this year, I would actually preach a certain level of caution. I think those of us who are able to be less cautious, we know our numbers cold, we know exactly what we're looking for, and to a degree, you're almost doing pre-due diligence. So I know what I want, and when what I want comes along, I'm in, I'm done. So if you're newer to the game and you aren't able to do that, I think it's vital that you acknowledge that you're less able to do that, and that it's not a problem, that is just a reality. And if you acknowledge it, that it prevents you from getting hurt. So if you're newer to the game, I'd say just keep reviewing deals. I got to know how to make things work for me by reviewing deals and understanding what was acceptable and what wasn't, by reviewing everything and then noticing what was the same every time and what was different every time. If you have some experience, if you have a lot of experience, maybe you don't need my help. But if you're just looking to see how much of a pivot you're going to need to engage in, I just encourage you to review what you thought of the fundamentals a year ago or 2 years ago, and really identify what has changed. Because short of some of the very recent COVID-19 related habits, such as not leaving your house, there are a lot of things that have changed, but there are a lot of things that remain the same as well. And beyond the fact that I am proud of our commercial tenants and how they've been able to pivot, there are a lot of businesses, even businesses where I'm a consumer in my local area, they're doing such a great job. There are people who felt they had no business being on the internet. These people who thought they'd never need to use a computer, and they figured out their e-commerce sites. They made it work. So I think going forward in the second half of 2020, be cautious and don't skip steps. Complete your due diligence, complete all of it. But at the same time, have some faith and have some resiliency in the landscape and in the people in our cities who are working and getting things done, because people have been resilient and they are pivoting, they're working hard, and it's all working out.
Awesome. Great advice. Thanks again, Jon.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Jon for sharing his perspective about commercial real estate. I think this was a really fun conversation. I hope you guys got value from it. If you did get value, smash that like button, hit the subscribe button if you're new to my channel. If you guys would like more Jon Kepler in your life, check out this playlist right here, or check out this playlist right here. But either way, smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and remember, sharing is caring. So when you guys share these videos, it really does help me as a content creator, because the niche I'm focused on just isn't going to go viral, but it really does matter to me and my team, the difference between, say, 1,000 views and 2,000 views. It's a nice little ego boost. So if you guys can do us a favor, start sharing these more on social media. Sharing is caring. Thanks, guys.